What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at Manchester City versus Burnley and the tactics behind Manchester City's win and how they control the game so well and minimize the threat of their opponents. And before we start, check out both my books. They're online, they're on Amazon, and there's links in the description below. Also, be sure to check out Keyframe. It's how I made this video, and if you subscribe to Keyframe, you get a free copy of my book. But let's get right into the video. So Manchester City built from the back in the initial phase of their build-up with a four-man build-up and a clear back four with their two central defenders being split by their goalkeeper. Then in the midfield three, we started with three central midfielders and a single pivot, and then the front three pinning the back four. So from here, Burnley tried to deal with this threat in a 4-4-2 as they usually do throughout the season, and what they did really well was they staggered their midfielders as they moved higher up the field to give them better access on different vertical and horizontal lines. Then their two forwards would press the three-man build-up of Manchester City, which would create the free player in the wider area, and at times Manchester City would also manipulate their midfield to then create a midfield four with an inverted winger coming off the outside to then create numerical advantage. But as we see here, the numerical advantage appeared in the wide area. As the game went on, Manchester City used asymmetry to access the wide area and change their connections during their build-up phase. We still have the wide player being free, as well as the holding midfielder now becoming our free player. And how Manchester City used to access this is they used first line passing to attract the pressure of the two central forwards, and then they also used the wide areas as a way to attract pressure from the Burnley midfield, which would then draw Burnley's midfield out into a wider position and allow Rodri to become more clear as the free player in a larger amount of space and allow them to exploit this when the ball entered the wide area and Burnley's press moved wider and became overstretched. In the midfield third, Manchester City went with their back four and a single pivot as their starting structure, and what would happen was Ake would oftentimes drop in alongside the two central defenders, allowing then Cancelo to have more freedom in the wide area or join Rodri as the double pivot. But Rodri, being the single pivot at the moment, benefited from three advanced attacking midfielders, allowing them to then pin the entire midfield of Burnley by playing between the midfielders and then pin the four-man midfield of Burnley with three attacking more advanced players of Manchester City. Then the back four and single pivot would look to then progress past the two forwards of Burnley and exploit the free player. The width would be held from the two wingers in the wide area, also creating height, and what would happen with the three advanced players from Manchester City is it would tempt Burnley's central defenders to jump into these areas between the lines, which would open up avenues for runs in behind and space to hurt Burnley in behind their back four. Here we see Ake joining the two central defenders of Manchester City to create a back three. We still go with our single pivot and three advanced players as we see here, but now we have Sterling playing in a more central role as he did early on in the game, and we have Foden controlling the width in the wide area. So this offered more flexibility and it offered them more avenues to overload the half spaces between the lines. As we see, Mahrez and Bernardo Silva overloading this right-sided half space between the lines, looking to create space, but as the game progressed, they went with a more clear structure and simplified the player roles and used less overloads and more positional superiority to have easier access to the free player in advanced positions. When they would go with a high volume of players in the central corridor, especially between the lines, Burnley's shape was able to then become very compact and minimize any threat of the Manchester City players in these areas because they were able to block access to the ball of Manchester City into these areas. Now we go with our back three again, but we see in the midfield third when Burnley became over compact, the wingers and attacking midfielders of Manchester City would then look to create runs in behind and exploit the high back four of Burnley. So as we see, Burnley's compactness vertically and horizontally is very over compact for the mid block, offering up a lot of space in behind. And with the three advanced players positioning themselves now between the defenders of Burnley, the back four is easily manipulated to become more narrow, then releasing space in behind for Phil Foden in the wide area. Now looking at the low block for Burnley, they still went with their 4-4-2, but their wide midfielder on the weak side would be very oriented towards Cancelo, the fullback, who would make advanced runs, especially early on in the game, whereas later on he would take up this Kevin De Bruyne role in a more central position, allowing De Bruyne to then move higher up the field and allow Mahrez to be the player holding the width. But we have our two forwards staggering themselves on different horizontal lines, and now we go with a 2-3 rest defense shape, which gives them good support in behind, and as we see, they move higher up the field than the halfway mark because of the depth Burnley take up in their low block from both their forwards. And with the W rest defense, it gives them direct access to the midfielders of Burnley, which would be the source of their offensive transition, allowing Manchester City a quick counter press to win the ball higher up the field. Now with Burnley in possession, they went with their 4-4-2 as you would expect from Burnley, and were very vertical in their tendency in possession, playing vertical passes through the half spaces direct into their two forwards. And this played into the Manchester City 4-2-4 defensive setup with the two central forwards for Manchester City, and the wide midfielders of Manchester City were almost disconnected from the two holding midfielders in the defensive phase, which vacated the half space and could have potentially been a source for Manchester City to be broken in, but Burnley with their direct play would skip the midfielders altogether in a lot of instances, play into the forwards, and then the Manchester City two midfielders would be there to collect the second ball. So that's going to wrap up today's analysis. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.